Hi, my name is Dennis Stegwalt. I'm president of the Housing Innovation Alliance, and you're dialed into our Rethinking the Supply Chain event. We have a great group, cross-section of the industry experts that are going to represent the industry today on our panel session. But before I get into introducing them, I just want to give you a little bit of background about the Housing Innovation Alliance for those that may not be familiar. So we are a broad cross-section of industry experts representing the entire ecosystem of residential construction. Our end goal: help big builders build better. And we look at the opportunities for innovation across the value chain to drive new solutions and affordability for the middle market. This particular event, as I mentioned, is focused on rethinking the supply chain. And as we've experienced over the last 12 months, we've really highlighted, or I should say the challenges we've experienced the last 12 months have really highlighted some of the systemic issues we're facing in our industry when it comes to the supply chain and how we create value and deliver product for our customers and end users. So what we're going to do today is look to our group of experts to really help us unfold, what are the challenges they're experiencing, how are they overcoming them, and what's the industry going to look like 5, 10, 15 years from now. Before we get started, just want to thank our class of 2021, as I've been referring to them. These are the industry partners that support our programming throughout the year. So thank you to everyone participating and involved here. And with that, I want to hand the mic over to our chairman, George Casey, who's going to introduce our team of esteemed panelists to get into the conversation today. George, take it from here.
Thanks, Dennis. I appreciate it. Good morning, afternoon to everyone. Morning, I guess, still on the West Coast, afternoon for the rest of us here on the East Coast. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our panel today. And I'm going to start with John Ballard. John, raise your hand there. Who's coming to us from Hot Springs, Arkansas today. Normally he's out of Dallas, but he's working out of Hot Springs. So he's division president, supply chain with Hyphen Solutions. And he has over 20 years of experience in dealing with the supply chain, with sales, with how really we get things to market, the things we use in houses, the better ways. He's probably like the movie, you got the good, the bad, and the ugly he can talk about, but he's deep invested into it. Ashley Potter is the area vice president of procurement at Pulte, and she's based out of Southwest Florida, and she comes to us today, I think she said from Bonita Springs. Is that right today? So there we are. And Ashley's been with Pulte for the past 15 years, and she's really focused on supply chain and production management. She's worked on floor plans. She's worked on simplifying her supply chain. She's been deep into this issue for one of the largest builders in the country. And finally, Bert Stevens. Bert's coming from Atlanta today. He's a senior vice president of operational excellence and the Ready Frame with Builders FirstSource, also known as BFS, as many of us know us. He has been involved in the industry in continuous improvement efforts and also a lot of work in automation, innovation, and really some of the advanced practices of how we start thinking about how we do things differently. Lean manufacturing, all of these things, he's into it. So that's our panel. Me, George Casey, I'm kind of a dinosaur in the industry in many ways. I did the calculation last night. I've been in the industry for 47 years. So yes, we still swung hammers. There were no nail guns, still licked the pencils when we marked the wood. But I've been involved as a division president, as a COO, a CMO, a CFO, a CEO, and a board member of home building companies. And I've kind of seen a lot of the work involved. I've also written a lot for Builder Magazine in particular about kind of the future of home building. So this is an area that I have a lot of personal interest in. And it's fun to me to actually see this group and to begin to start talking about this issue. So with that, I'm going to start off with a question. If there was one inefficiency in the current supply chain, a major pain point, what would it be and how would you solve it if you had a magic wand? Ashley, start us off.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me today, first of all. If I had a magic wand, I think I would create a supply chain that could perfectly flex with the cyclical housing cycles. But I think we know clearly that's not the environment that we're in today. I think one pain point that I would call out is really the lack of skilled labor today. We saw skilled labor leave home building back in the recession years beginning in 2007 that really never returned, at least in a meaningful way. I think moving scopes that are traditionally performed on site to an off-site facility can reduce our reliance on that local labor. I think we see really broad variation in quality from region to region. So certainly moving jobs off-site can help with that. It's worth noting that there's difficulty sourcing labor in a manufacturing capacity as well today. But I think a key advantage in transferring jobs to an off-site operation is really our ability to attract greater diversity and talent. I think women are a notable example of that. I think there's just perhaps a different appeal in a factory, a different level of job satisfaction, fulfillment, challenge, a little bit of a different career path. So I think looking at skilled labor in that context of manufacturing can help bridge that gap, or at least a good start.
Yeah, no, actually, one of the interesting statistics is that the in the field trade base is someplace around 2 to 4% female. And factory labor, including those in panel plants and things, particularly in this industry, can oftentimes run 25 to 40% female, so just as you described. So the opportunity to go inside actually broadens the labor force and creates a career path that isn't necessarily there in the field. So it's a little bit of what you said. I'd like to transfer over to Bert because what Ashley is describing is a little bit of the world that you deal with. And same question, what major pain points are you seeing and how would you solve it if you had a magic wand?
I think some of the inefficiencies that we see in the supply chain currently are in the processes. Some of the processes are done ad hoc and not enough written time and time again processes that you can rely on. Even in the processes of forecasting, production rates, the different things like that kind of brings on the inefficiencies. And in some instances, you will see that there is a repeat of the same processes when you're dealing with your supplier. So you've got the same process issues internally, but that process issue also goes into how you're dealing with your suppliers, whether it's how are you getting priced, how are you getting invoiced, how are you communicating with each other. So, you know, I see the largest amount of inefficiencies in the process in the supply chain currently is in the process.
So Bert, I presume inside of your organization, you have people that are working on process control and improvement?
Yes, that would be the people in my my group. That's what we work on is how do we work on our process improvement? And when we say that, you know, continuous improvement is actually an activity. It's a verb, right? So there's actions that has to happen to be in continuous improvement. So you hear that a lot in a lot of different industries, and they'll talk about, hey, we're working on continuous improvement, but there has to be activity around that to actually drive continuous improvement.
So John, you're shaking your head. I presume there's agreement here?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think about what both Ashley and Bert said, and I would say in my mind and what I hear reflected from the builder is labor issue and process. So both of those are spot on. And, you know, I think about from a labor perspective, I'm talking with the builder a few months back, I'm on a job site and the trades are telling me we're teaching some of the young guys of the builders how we build. But the concern is the aging labor force is such that we're losing so much knowledge and expertise. Who's going to really be that next catalyst for knowledge and how to push that knowledge, which leads us into the process, which leads us into how do we create those efficiencies. And then, when I think about what Bert's saying about process automation, that's my whole world is about automation. If you can automate it, let's automate it, but not just for automation's sake. It's really the idea of what information can I provide more succinctly in a timely basis to more of the constituents that exist in the supply chain. So from the builder to the installer, to the distributor, to the manufacturer, and how do I get that visibility out there so everybody is on the same page and being able to react and act upon what that fulfillment need is for the builder.
So let me ask Ashley a question. Ashley, how many industrial engineers do you have out on your job site working on process control and improvement?
Not a ton.
Yeah, I mean, in my world, John, you're out visiting. How many do you see out in the field?
Haven't run into very many.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
I mean,
less than one.
yeah. and yet I go into Bert's world, and Bert's probably got a couple industrial engineers. He's got people that, in the GE world would have probably been Six Sigma black belts working on process improvement projects, so on and so forth. So
yeah, that is true. We, with our company right now, we've got, in my group, I can tell you that I've got 4 black belts that actually work on continuous improvement within my group, and they're all either industrial or mechanical engineering as a discipline.
Right. So, I mean, one of the interesting things is building is actually a manufacturing process. And yet most builders don't treat it as such, as something that it is a process that can be documented, can be improved, can be monitored, so on and so forth. So I think one of the potential things here is that if you've got supply chain issues right now, if you, inside of the existing system, if you, as a builder, started looking, could I apply industrial engineers into those things and improve on the systems as they are right now, I could get better even without going to a factory. If I go to a factory that's already doing these things, I can leapfrog that thing, but it's not like it's impossible. I know 25 years ago, I had a vice president of process control and improvement that worked on the project of cutting our cycle time for building homes in half. And, he was an industrial engineer who actually did this stuff. So it's not impossible to be done. It just takes the willpower. I want to go back to John, where you were a little bit. That Boston Consulting Group, more than a decade ago, estimated that by 2030, digitally enabled direct distribution on building materials directly to installers or end customers would be more common. Think about Amazon for builders, eliminating multiple layers of the way things are handled. Do you think that's happening already? And if so, is it succeeding?
I do. I think it was pioneered, by our appliance manufacturers, where the big 3 are able to go direct, deliver and install, and have that direct relationship with the builder. And I think there was a lot of fighting with their distributor partners about shooting over their shoulder. And I think as other manufacturers get to the place where they want to deliver direct, you're going to get that pushback, at least in the early stages of, wait a minute, we're partners. If you go direct, I'm going to pull your stuff off the shelf or what have you. But there's no question that we're going to see more and more manufacturers go a direct route. Right now, we're working with Best Buy. I mean, 5 years ago, you wouldn't have thought of Best Buy being in this industry at all. I mean, go to Best Buy to buy your phone, right? But yet we have an integration into their back office where builders are utilizing them for fulfillment, and we're able to push orders to Best Buy. And so I think you're going to see that, whether it's an Amazon for builders, which is, I think, aptly called out. We have calls with the big boxes several times throughout the year, with the Home Depots, with the Lowe's, trying to crack that code on delivery. But from the manufacturer standpoint, It's figuring out that distribution. I think it goes back to what Bert said about process. Now all of a sudden, am I hiring an order service team for the manufacturer that I really never had to do before? How do I effectively manage that? How can I make that efficient? And then the process of delivering is not any harder necessarily, because I'm delivering it today somewhere, but changing the logistics of where that's being delivered and how that's staged for the builder, is a big question that has to be still answered.
So Ashley, how are you working in this world, trying to, I would call it, shorten the chain by taking out steps in the middle? So talk to us about how you're on that journey.
Yeah, I think I would have to echo that we do see some embedded inefficiency depending on the category that you're looking in, layers upon layers of distribution, sometimes layers that aren't even touching or handling the product, but just are kind of embedded in the supply chain. So that's something we spend a lot of time on, really challenging ourselves and our teams on the value add in each step of the process. But on the other hand, we've been able to convert many contracts to direct. We're buying a tremendous amount of materials direct. John, you mentioned appliance manufacturers. And so we really are seeing greater sophistication and collaboration in kind of the ways we're communicating and sharing information and demand planning. I think really the core catalyst when we look at a more efficient distribution model, it would be having a dialed in, precise bill of materials that's configured for each specific lot. I think it's technology that's evolving pretty rapidly and is becoming more commonplace, but that's kind of what we're seeing kind of on both sides.
Just kind of a follow-up question there. Are you seeing more standardization, simplification of SKUs, but also, the cartridging of bathrooms and kitchens that are built off-site and dropped into a house? So you're not delivering all the pieces, you're delivering a sub-assembly, if you would. Are you seeing any of that right now?
Yeah, I think it's evolving pretty rapidly. So I think you're seeing kind of all ends of the spectrum, but certainly an evolution that's moving in that direction.
Yeah. So
maybe someone who can integrate countertop and cabinets and flooring, for example, and one provider, kind of a multifunctional trade to integrate all three.
Yeah, my head is going around the idea of an auto assembly line, that they're not necessarily building the engine on the assembly line. It's coming in and being delivered where it's needed and plopped into the chassis going down the line. And I could envision kitchens and some other things being done that way in terms of doing it. Bert, this is your world, isn't it? That you're taking and you're creating pieces off-site to go to the job site. And I guess the ultimate is probably doing an entire module of a house. But tell us about how that's working for you right now, how you're on that.
Well, we do a lot of penalization. So there's a lot of penalization. There are those that are moving down that modular. So as you were saying, a complete bathroom that be dropped into a house, there's companies out there that are working on that. And I think that it is evolving, as Ashley is saying, it is coming along, it's evolving as we go. But, because of some of the standards are not in alignment between municipalities, states, and so on. I mean, I think that's got a hard road to move up. But in our case, we see that penalization, whether you're looking at trusses or floors or walls, seems to be the biggest mover right now. And that penalization gives you more control over the customization of your plans and what you're trying to do with your housing and the offerings to the end customer. When you're thinking about the modular, that modular approach is more of this is what that looks like. But when you're looking at penalization, it's more of you can be a little bit more creative with the way that it approaches the end customer. But when you were talking, I was taking some notes, and the first thing I was thinking is, when you're looking at this, what we want to concentrate on is reliability and repeatability.
Yep.
So we got to be reliable in how we get it to the customer, and then the repeatability of it all. And that's what I think penalization brings to the table, of being able to give you that process that will give you the reliability and the repeatability that you're looking for. And it also gives you the quality, right, that the end customer is looking for.
Yeah, the words I learned were consistency and predictability. Those are probably favorite words of yours too, Bert.
Right.
It's interesting because this actually takes us into a thought process that some people think the new single-family home built for rent business will be the accelerator on innovation in these processes and modularization, because there is a higher consistency of the product. You don't have a lot of variability. It's closer to an apartment kind of thing, that and we have 3 colors of toilet: bone, bone, and bone. That is really this single family for rent kind of a way that, okay, allows us to go to maybe a next step for a segment of the market. Meanwhile, the larger segment of the market, the for sales, is becoming more attuned to panels, trusses, and so on being built in a factory. Is that the way it works, that the SFR guys are kind of out on the edge, that because they're a little more consistent, predictable in terms of their product and their pacing, they can go deeper inside of the industrialization piece, or the for sale piece that has a lot more variability to it can't go quite that far yet, but it can go to panels and trusses. Does that make John comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Bert is probably super aligned with that thought process, but my take is this, my thought is this. So if you think about single family for rent, the homeowner or the renter, if you will, is not going to be as discriminating as they would be if they were simply buying a home, right? They're going to walk in, they're going to have certain expectations of types of product. And in my mind, I think about one of our partners on here, RIA.
Yep.
They've got a super cool product line with this high velocity duct that's like a 4-inch duct, that if you think about the space savings and the efficiency of the simple installation, let alone the efficiency gain that the end user is going to receive, that to me is a game changer. The problem is you've got this embedded ductwork mechanical contractor thing in, rip and replace business for the retail, Home Depot, Lowe's, which you've got new construction. How do you, as a RIA, go after a segment of the market that should change fundamentally how HVAC units are ducted, right? And in my mind, that single family for rent is the place to try that, because the renter is not going to be, again, as objective to, oh, that's a different type of vent in my ceiling, versus a homeowner walking into a community expecting something that they've been preconditioned to receive. And to me, that changes the game. From the modular construction standpoint, there's still a little bit of that stigma about a manufactured home. And I think you get around that and prove the efficiencies. I mean, you can run Six Sigma inside of a warehouse all day long, right? And deliver panels to the job site and those truss assemblies and put the thing up in a day. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely.
So Ashley, as they would say in your freshman English course, please compare and contrast. What do you think here?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I actually think that the type of innovation that you're talking about with different assemblies, and RIA is a good example of this, different materials, is transferable to even other business segments. I think we're seeing our entry level and affordable business that we've kind of spent more time expanding our footprint in over the last couple of years is perhaps a good pilot for this sort of innovation as well. Really simplified floor plans, zero structural options, very limited customization, simplified SKUs, simplified high quality SKUs, but still simplified SKUs. And I think this type of activity is transferable there as well.
It's interesting that this is, for those of us long enough to remember, you had US Home on one hand and you had Lennar on the other. And US Home was, I think as you described, was very simple, not much choice, so on and so forth. Lennar was the other way. And you know, it was kind of a tastes great, less filling kind of conversation that went on with this. But you are seeing this segmentation that, you know, you can have it simple and be potentially less wasteful, more productive, but it's also a different kind of a platform for innovation because you do get the consistency and predictability of the simplification.
George, I think the taste great, less filling probably went over the head of most of our audiences. Not me, of course, because I'm of the age that I remember the Miller Lite commercials, but everybody else probably was like, what is that?
Oh, see, I just want to send people to Wikipedia, man. That's it.
Great commercials, by the way.
Yeah, it tastes great, less filling.
That's right.
You know, I look at your world, Bert, and in terms of your customers, who seems to be more amenable to these changes of on a road to industrialized construction as opposed to building everything on site with no industrialization? Is there a way you can categorize what's going on?
So, you know, we're not naming names.
Yeah, no, I don't expect you to.
But, you know, I think that we see that there is everyone's trying to move that way. Problem is everyone's trying to move that way in a different way. Instead of in a collective, you know, unified process, they're all coming in a different way, even when you're talking about digital. So and that's something that we as a company have gotten better at, even though if you ask me, and it's just my opinion, we're better at design of homes than anybody as far as in the structural piece. But you know, we have tried to get better and better in that digital world to make sure that we stay on top of that. But even in that digital world, everyone's coming a different way. So I think when we talk about that, who's leading the way, there's not one sector or one home builder. They're all heading that way, trying to get there. They're just coming about it in a different car, if you would.
Do you envision a world where the tables turn, where, you know, a BFS or so on actually has a catalog of just the best kind of floor plans that have really been engineered and so on and so forth, and builders come and say, I want that, and that's what I'm going to put on the site because you've already got it costed, you know where you can get it, and so on and so forth, and it fits a psychographic demographic segment. And you know, you can go one way and say you can have an architect design it and all this kind of stuff, or B, you've got an off the shelf, an F-150 that we can feed you, and that F-150, we can tell you exactly the cost. It's been built so many times, we know exactly how it goes together. Do you think that perhaps a BFS drives the consistency coming back the other way?
Well, you know what, I'm going to say, I'll say it this way. I'm going to say that I have all confidence in our executive leadership that if they feel like that is the right way to go, that we will. But I also want to go back, and because I brought this up before in many, you know, in some other conversation, is that's the Sears method, right? They built 75,000 houses over a period of time, and some of those houses are still standing. They had 16 standard plans, and when you got them, they came pre-cut with the windows, doors, plumbing, everything you need, including the drapes. Is it possible? It's been done in the past. Will it come back around? Sure, it could come back around. Whether or not our leadership leads us down that way, I don't know. If they do, I'll be the first one on board to try to make sure that the processes are in place to make sure that we get it out on time. But as far as that is, that concept has been done and was very successful. And most of those houses, they stopped that in 1940. And some of those houses are still standing, and they went all the way from Chicago down into Florida.
Yeah, I think there's actually some in Australia, if I remember, seeing some ads for them there. John, your thought? Oh, go ahead, Ashley. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was just gonna kind of add to that. I think when you back up for a second, I think there's a number of builders who like the idea of the efficiency that's being described.
Yeah.
But getting a culture to drive to acceptance of a common simplified floor plan where individuals don't have the ability to influence those designs, but they're instead influenced by consumer feedback or through a value engineering process, really does require that culture shift. Same idea, getting to a simplified SKU platform. It's something we've spent a lot of time in over the years, and I think are pleased with some of the ways we've seen our culture shift to acceptance of that. But I think you have to have kind of that rigorous process discipline internally before you can, be open to that type of menu.
Yeah, I think if you think of it as a continuum, on one hand, you have, very efficient designs that may have good look on the outside, but they're designed for consumer segment. There's not a lot of optionality for the customer with it. But with it comes consistency, predictability, and maybe a better pricing model. On the other hand, you've got something that, is totally custom, that you go to the architect and you have the custom builder. And then in the middle, you have kind of the worlds of where Toll Brothers works that is more towards the customizable end versus those that are perhaps at the single family for rent, and that is really a very standardized product, so on and so forth. And there's stuff in the middle. And one of the objectives here is, how do you create attainable housing for all income segments? And just as if I want a great suit, I go to London and I can get a custom bespoke suit for 10 grand. Or I can go to Men's Warehouse and get one for $199. And there's stuff in between there. But I think maybe in the housing side, we haven't had enough of the simplified, whether you call it Sears Roebuck or after World War II, National Homes was one of the large national operators. We maybe haven't had enough of that, and we've been more towards the center and upper part that allows more customization, but with that, more waste, more inefficiency, and therefore perhaps isn't delivering the value that all the market leaves. John, compare and contrast, comment if you would.
Yeah, I think it's a tough putt to think that there is a consortium of builders that would ascribe to 15, 20 plans to put their logo on it and go stick it on a lot somewhere. I think that's a tough, but I think as it relates to, we talk about single family for rent. Yeah, that probably works. But as it relates to, the American dream, because quite frankly, that's what we're doing all day, every day, is building the American dream. These builders want to differentiate by their name, by putting that shingle up or that billboard on the highway. They want to differentiate what that product offering looks like. So I think it's tough that you're going to have 4 or 5 or 8 builders willing to put the exact same plan down, call it a different thing, and get a tremendous amount of buy-in. Maybe entry level, you could get away with that. But as you move up to any semi, custom or any level of options, it's going to be difficult. But by the way, I did want to add to Bert's comment about the Sears. Some of those homes are probably going for 10 or 20 times what they went for when they originally purchased. those are nostalgic and well-built homes that Sears put out. And I believe for the most part, they were self-built. I'm not even sure that you had a general contractor build it. So
Yeah.
it was planned simplicity, you know.
Yeah.
So pretty cool stuff.
Let me do something here. So it's December 31st, 2029. Okay. We're saying it's the end of the decade. And you're sitting there, you know, with your glass of champagne, getting ready to toast in the new decade. And you look back and you start thinking, how has the supply chain for production housing changed? What does it look like then? What went out of business? Who went out of business and why? What kinds of companies pivoted and adapted and why? What kinds of brand new players came in and succeeded and why? And how did you grow and prosper in this whole thing? So, John, you're sitting there, you're up there in Hot Springs. You probably, no, you got some bullet whiskey. You're not drinking champagne.
Bullet bourbon.
You got that up there. So talk to me. What do you think? What does it look like? Almost 10 years from now.
I love this question. So you have to allow me to elaborate a little.
Yeah.
I love the question because back in 2006, I started thinking about what this looks like. And I would have told you in 2006 what I think what you're asking in 10 years from now, what it looks like. I mean, it's a slow thing, right? It's that we're not moving near as fast as we would like to move. But I think it goes back to this idea of the ecosystem. At the end of the day, we are all in this together. The builder, the trades, the distributors, the manufacturers. We are all in this together. And if you think about what we have is we have a marketplace. And what we haven't done is to say, hey, Mr. Builder, the top 50. Hey, manufacturers, which I mentioned, there's 14,000 suppliers on my system. By the way, those 14,000 suppliers build every home in the country of the top production builders. They're just involved with all the builders. Why are we not leveraging the insurance companies for healthcare, homeowners insurance? Why are we not leveraging them for the trade insurance? Why are we not leveraging fleet for the vehicles that are out there as a group, as a collective offering? Why are we not taking the data that exists today, but super fragmented, and being able to streamline that and give complete transparency and visibility throughout the supply chain to create those efficiencies? I think about all of the different things that we could do as a collective group if we agreed to do it, that absolutely would lower the cost to serve. It would lower the cost to build. It would provide better products that are in the market. Innovation would be rampant because this consortium, if you will, this ecosystem would be in this user group of the top 50 saying, this is what we need to drive, this is what we need to create, and we're willing to cooperate in that environment. Who doesn't make it? Those that fail to automate. If you try to still build houses with Excel spreadsheets and big cheap yellow tablets and a pen, you're not going to survive. It's just not going to happen. If you are a trade and you're not adapting field management tools, if you're not adapting and developing your education and your knowledge and continuing to improve that, you're not going to survive. If you're going to continue to put in products that were developed and built 50 years ago, in 10 years, I don't think you're going to survive. If you're a manufacturer that is not willing to innovate because you're too tied to your retail base, I think you're going to go away. So, those that, are embracing the digitization and the automation, all of those things are, to me, a no-brainer. Those that will adopt the field management tools to get better as a collective, right? We need to educate the builder as much as we need to educate the trade. And then to leverage cost out as a group. Go leverage those things that everybody pays for staples in their collective companies. right? Why wouldn't you have this hub to go out there and leverage that for all of the constituents in your ecosystem? So I think there needs to be that. And in my world, as I sit back sipping my bullet bourbon 10 years from now, smoking my pipe, that's what we're doing.
By the way, you just finished your third shot of bullet bourbon. You're on your fourth right now, man.
And I'm feeling good.
Ashley, how about you? You're sitting down there in South Florida. You've got, let me guess, you got your Tommy Bahama shirt on, and you probably got an umbrella drink rocking, and you're sitting back. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's been discussed at length. I think what a slow burn it's been, how stagnant the industry has been for decades and decades. Yeah. But I do think we've seen some critical advancements just even in recent years. I know some of the technology that a number of companies, Pulte certainly among them, are pursuing is looking at ways to really transition floor plan design to component production with 3D modeling and solutions. And I think we're going to continue to see some progress in that space, which really then designing components in minutes has all kinds of implications for efficiencies down the line. I agree with you, John, in terms of we've got to find ways to make things more affordable. Those who choose not to kind of work together and collaborate in that space, I don't think will be around. But I think kind of as we go through these different cycles, as the landscape changes, it's important to intelligently integrate offsite solutions kind of with our existing relationships, find like-minded partners. I think, you know, Bert, BFS is kind of with Pulte can be that type of like-minded partner who are pursuing this innovation and these solutions together. Maybe one other thing worth mentioning, I talked about previously about multifunctional trades. And I think as you move towards offsite solutions and installations become more simple because of the technology, you can see an emergence maybe of more companies that are multifunctional in terms of the scopes they deliver.
Okay, let me go to Bert. He's up there in Atlanta. I'm not sure what he's drinking, but you know it's going to be hot because it's Atlanta. So you're sitting there, Bert. What you're looking back? You know, is there still a BFS, or is BFS changed significantly? Has the builder changed? Has the supply chain changed? You know, what happened during the last 10 years?
Well, first and more importantly, we will be drinking scotch. So,
okay.
So we're drinking scotch, and you know, the questions that you were asking. So, what does the supply chain look like then? I think the supply chain. I think houses will be built digitally before they will be put in production. So I believe that penalization and value-added processes like ReadyFrame will lead the way. I think that there will be shorter building cycles to help in the building of the houses will become shorter. Those that do not embrace the change will fall to the wayside. So I don't see them moving forward. It's the embracing of the change that is about to happen. And those changes are happening now. I believe that Builders FirstSource will still be here, and we will be leading the way, not only in our penalization and value-added products like ReadyFrame, but also because of our commitment to continuous improvement and innovation. I mean, we invest in our continuous improvement, and we invest diligently in our innovation with our products. You know, the whole thing about it in the last part that you were talking about, I believe that those that embrace the changes that are about to happen will lead the way. And that's pretty much the way I see it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a pretty good thing. So I'm going to now go back to Dennis, if you would, and let him play point guard here and start shoveling passes to us to answer based upon our attendees and what they want to hear. So Dennis?
All right, sounds great. So a couple of things I just want to call out that I really liked. You know, this focus on the fact that it's going to be all about the culture to drive the business forward. I love the idea of the ecosystem focus. We can get better together, and that's got to be the emphasis. Of course, that's why we as an organization exist. So love to continue to reinforce that one. And this major focus of, you know, kind of digitization or die. Right. I mean, we kind of keep hearing this come up over the course of a lot of our conversations, and it's coming back out again today. So all excellent points. There's a number of questions in our queue. I'm going to start throwing them out. We'll see how many we can get to. This conversation is scheduled to go to about 3:15. So we'll wrap up at about 10 after, and then I'll just share some highlights of what's to come for our next events. But the first one comes from Rodney Hall. He's referring to referring to a specific solution set. You know, in the case of Ready Frame or with what Pulte's doing with ICG, do you start to see whole lumber packages go out as purchase, fabrication, and install? So more of the true total installed solution coming out from more of the providers in the industry. I don't know if anyone wants to kind of jump on that and kind of, you know, he referenced the Buddy Rainey example specifically.
So
Yeah, I'll jump on that just a little bit. I think that that's something that will continue to grow and grow. But again, we have to watch what's happening out in the field as far as the craftsmen that are leaving our industry or exiting out into retirement, and we don't have that kind of coming back. So I think that that's going to grow as far as the installed ready frame packages and stuff like that. I believe that's going to continue to grow up.
Yeah, that's really what ICG's business model is, to integrate all of those things. I know BFS has a similar model, and I think it is important to intelligently integrate those things while maintaining the existing partnerships and relationships. And I think that there is a way to combine those two things. But yes, I do think we'll see more and more of that moving forward.
I'm going to throw my 2 cents in here, Dennis. And I think that what you're going to start seeing is actually the evolution of something I call super subs. That essentially one super sub will essentially prepare the lot, do the foundation, all of that stuff. A second super sub will actually do much like Bert's business, will basically take the shell and create it on site. So that piece of stuff. A third one will be an exterior super sub that does siding, roofing, exterior painting, all of those things. A fourth one will be I'll call it a system super sub that does mechanical, electrical, high voltage, plumbing, all of that stuff that's the systems inside of a house. And then the fifth one will be an interior finish super sub that is doing probably insulation, drywall, tape, paint, installation of bathrooms, whether they're cartridges or whatever, flooring, so on and so forth. We all know that there's probably 50 to 70 subs that work on a house. I mean, that the handoffs and the complications of those communications are pretty difficult. To the extent you can at least begin to cut the communications down, it gives two opportunities. One, simplicity of doing stuff and repetitiveness. But the second is the ability that inside of those super subs to do Bert's world, which is how do you do process control and improvement inside of that, so that those things that are typically working together are actually learning to do it more efficiently. So while it's going parallel in the factory, you're having modules built in the factory as one solution. Out on the site, if you choose to go that route, you're getting this other kind of industrialization that's going on site as an alternative.
Yeah, no, it builds off of Ashley's point on the multifunctional trade and really takes it to the next level. So this must be one of your 2029 predictions then, George, throwing the ball back at you.
Yeah, it is. I think you're going to see multiple solutions, but every one of those solutions will have to be more efficient. I mean, what Bert is talking about, what John is talking about, what Ash, you can't have the waste in time, materials, rework that we have right now. So either whether you choose to do it mostly on site or do it in a factory, both of those are going to have to be worked on a more industrialized logic than they are right now.
All right, thanks. John, anything you'd like to add or move on to the next one?
You know, the only thing I would add is that you know, I've heard, you know, he says super sub, which I love it. A couple of years ago, I was in a event that they call it super trades. We're going to see the advent of these super trades, and we see it today in a lot of the major markets where you've got a mechanical contractor that's now doing the plumbing and electrical.
Yeah.
And it just makes sense. And to Ashley's point, hey, if I can do flooring, countertops, and cabinets, and I can get those guys scheduled because that's the next 3 pieces of the staging for the build, and the same contractor is doing that, then I'm going to lower my cycle time and probably remove mistakes or breakage en route to doing that. So no question about it. I love the way George framed it up in 5 different big build stages. So I think that's perfectly the way it needs to go.
All right, so that one's a clear thumbs up then. We're
Clear
going
thumbs
to say, yeah, right. I really like this next question from Clay Wellborn. So do you think that the single family for rent home building companies entering the market will increase the number of homes delivered each year, or will they take a piece of the current yearly output? And then how does that impact the tight supply chain and rising costs? I think that fits in very well with some of the conversation we've been having
Shout
around
out to
overall.
Clay, great question.
Yeah. So George, why don't you kick us off with an answer to that, a response to that one?
I think it's incremental add. That the efficiencies that you'll see in that will allow units to come to market. But I also think those efficiencies will dribble off into the for sale side, and it might be at the entry level side or whatever. So I think that will net on net give you both more production capacity and both coming out of the factory. So I think in the end, it's a net add. We're dealing with, pick a number between 4 million and 7 million houses short that we didn't build in the last decade. That's why we've got this problem we've got right now, is that there's way more demand than there is supply. And you can keep throwing supply at this forever. And the more we can throw at it that is out of additional labor or getting better productivity out of existing labor, either one of them leads to a better production throughput than we're getting right now.
All right, great. Bert, can you add to that from the supplier side?
You know, I think, you know, so let me preface this. So this is Bert Stevens' views, not views of BFS. This is, I think that it will end up being a net. I think that if it takes away from anything, it'll be the entry level. I don't think that it will take away from the more higher level, more custom homes or anything like that. I think that those will be some of the start of the entry level homes. So you'll have the for rent model that's going to probably take a little bit away from there, but it will increase the capacity to open up for those higher level homes as they move up in the chain. So I think that we will see a little drop in the entry level and more going into, if that expands more than it is right now. Right now, I think it's just it's a wait and see. It's a new concept. Everyone's high on that concept. It looks good on paper. It looks good, smells good, might be good. But I think we're going to have to wait and see what that ends up being.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Bert. And Ashley, you know, so build for rent developers are fighting for the same lots that you are, right? Or most home builders. How do you see this playing out?
Yeah, I would say it's something we're monitoring really closely. Not a segment that we're participating in today, but watching it and seeing how we could potentially even create value within it. So I don't know that I have a ton of additional insights than what has been shared already, but definitely a space to watch. And I think, again, some of the translation of some of the different efficiencies that can be inserted into that business can be transferable to entry-level business as well.
Okay, great. And John, this is a booming business segment down in your part of the world or your part of the
Yeah.
country. So what do
Yeah.
you think?
I mean, I think it's incremental for sure. I think the question as it relates to does it carve out any market share from single family new construction as far as entry level comes down to price, right? So if it costs me virtually the same to rent versus buy, you're probably going to buy, I would think, right? You want that American dream, you want to own, you want the dream of home ownership. If it's a little above rent, but lower than single family for sale, you're probably going to gain some market share there. You may pull some of those first time entry home buyers away, at least for a short period of time. But the demand is there, the need is there. So I don't know that it's going to cut in too much, but I think it all revolves around where that price points are for renting versus buying.
Right.
Yeah. Good. So it sounds like,
Dennis, I have a curveball to throw in here.
Mhm.
I think where the real net increment is going to happen is actually in how you take existing building stock, and whether that's a 3,000 square foot house that exists, or it might be a office building that doesn't make sense anymore, or a commercial building that doesn't make sense anymore, and how a sophisticated, I'm going to use the word remodeler because that's the only word I know right now, who is highly efficient, is able to and take those spaces and create additional housing units without having to go and create new lots on the ground. So whether it's taking the 3,000 square foot house and turning it into a 1,500 square footer and two 750 square foot apartments. So I have now 3 housing units where I used to have 1. Or taking an office building where there was no housing units, and all of a sudden I've been able to renovate it into 60 housing units. That to me is going to be one of the more interesting things of where you can potentially see both incremental supply and the ability to have a business model that remodeling is mostly a mom and pop business right now. What if there were the equivalent of Pulte for remodeling that had the kind of supply chain, the kind of buying power and so on, that was able to transform a mom and pop business into something that is higher value add than it is right now? That to me is the more intriguing question.
It's an interesting point, and certainly the pressure that could help to take off that 5 to 7 million that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, it's interesting that 50 years ago, the average house was 1,200 square feet and 4.2 people lived in it. Right now, the average house is someplace 2,300 plus or minus. And I think it's like 2.1 people on average live in it. Just saying.
So kind of, thanks, George. And I want to get a couple more questions in here from the rest of the group, or the participants here. Building off the industrialized construction conversation, kind of linking that back to some of what's going on in the build for rent area and some of the organizations that are focusing on that. We have a question from Maxwell Cohen. How important is it to bring lenders, insurers, and other support industries into the industrialized space? So I think this builds off a point that John brought up earlier. How do we, collective bargaining as we're leveraging our way forward here? So maybe John, you want to start with this one?
Yeah, great question. What I would say is that we're working with one of the largest inspection companies in the country right now. And they are developing some technology that will be extended to the trades, extended to the builders, that will essentially be forms, if you will, that each trade will have that build better, right? So if you think about good housekeeping seal of approval, or you think about consumer reports or what have you, there's an insurance company that's backing this that says, I'm going to lower the cost to the trade if they utilize this app and use these forms. So think about that for a second, right? I now, as an insurance company, know that if I build better, if the house is built better, my frequency and severity as far as the breakage, as far as claims are concerned, is going to be lower. So now I can extend a lower cost to those trades to insure them if they're utilizing this consistent approach to how they build. And then the builder adopts it and says, if you're going to build on my lot, you're going to have this type certification, right? So, I mean, it's a big undertaking, it's a massive undertaking. but the insurance companies are listening, right? And now if they start to get involved, now it's the same thing with mortgage companies or lenders or what have you. If I've built a better home, or if I can consistently show you that the claims in the build jobs that I do is lower than others, my lenders are going to be happier, my insurers are going to be happier. Now you've got in your ecosystem all these other outside constituents that are participating.
Yeah, and a lot of benefits there for the end user as well,
Oh,
along the same value
At the
chain.
end of the day, it's
Yeah,
better for the homeowner. Absolutely.
absolutely.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know, Bert or Ashley, anything you'd like to add to this question?
Not especially. I am kind of digesting some of the insights that John just provided. So
Maybe they weren't very good insight.
Well, I don't think I have any, I can speculate, but that's not in my realm.
All right. George, any final thoughts on that one?
No, let's go to another one.
All right, great. Just kind of working through here. Do you think that the home buyer cares that a certain percentage of their house was built off-site? This is coming to us from Walker Harris.
I think they care if we can get it built faster. I think they care about how long the cycle time takes, how fast we can get them into their home.
I mean, I think it comes down to the predictability. With an offsite model, they can, with a higher level of confidence, ensure that their home is built with high quality materials and a consistent, and to your point, Bert, kind of a shorter cycle time. I think it's a win for any homeowner.
I would say that I agree with both those points. I think we all agree that building in a space that allows for less defects with the panelization is great. I think what we have to do is we have to educate the consumer, though. I think there's still that stigma, and I think that's where the question came from. So while I think we all agree, hey, if I'm going to build a house today, I want some of that stuff being panelized and done in the factory. It's not getting rained on, it's quality control, those things. I just think it's a matter of educating the consumer a little better on why that's so advantageous.
Yeah, I think language is important here. That I've watched over the last 3 or 4 years, it used to be, well, it's prefab. And prefab was a word that equivalent was like cheap. That you're seeing the word now, industrialized construction. That sounds professional, engineers are involved with it, so on and so forth. And I just think that, people don't care. They want a great place to live in that is well built. And so I think language matters. And I think correctly described is not going to be an issue at all.
Totally agree.
Good. So I 100%, that's what I see amongst my peers and the groups that we speak to about this. I think additional question here from Dave Malik. Question as it relates to the direct program with some manufacturers. How do y'all get around the pushback from the contractors whereby they will not be able to enjoy their markup, taking money out of their pocket, for example? In summary, how are these discussions going? What kind of pushback you getting? So no, John, you're nodding your head, I think you're ready to go with this one.
I'm sure Ashley is loving this question too.
It needs another bottle of Bullet right now.
Zach, what are you talking about?
Man, I cannot tell you how many conversations I had with distributors talking about me shooting over their shoulder, and if we're really partnered, how can you do this? And then threats, to take product out of the showrooms or what have you. And what happened in that situation is that those particular distributors, and I'm really talking on the appliance side, those particular distributors became better and offered a better mix or a higher mix of product and changed what they were doing. They innovated. And so what's going to have to happen is all these folks in the middle are going to have to innovate or die. And so it's not really a matter of, am I going to take you off? It's business. This is where it has to go. Now, what we might need to do is figure out how we help them innovate. We may have to figure out where they do play in the supply chain to make it accretive. But I think it's coming, and there's very, very little we can do about it, except to help facilitate it to be as smooth and as easy as possible.
All right.
I think, in today's environment, I saw earlier a comment about lumber costs today. And I think, we're seeing contractors who are saying, please buy the material for me. Please take as much of this off my plate. I'm not an expert in this area. I think if you can create something that's more predictable for them long-term and allow them to focus in the areas where they can continue to raise the bar and the value they're providing, I think that's where the mutual win can come into play.
All right.
Not seamless every time.
No, but I think the acknowledgement here is that you've got to have change. The system that we have right now, the ecosystem, I think the way you described it, John, we can see is kind of redlined at this level that's like between multifamily and single family and manufactured at someplace around 1.6 million housing units a year. The demand just to make up for what we've missed plus what is current demand needs almost 2.5 million a year. So you've got, you're going to need a change in the production system. You're probably going to have a really constraint on the lot supply system. And the elephant in the room here is that to have the change in the lot supply and the ability to do that production, I don't know how you get past NIMBYism, where a lot of places just don't want people moving in. And so to me, there's several pieces here that need to change. The NIMBY I can't solve overnight, but what you can do is solve getting higher productivity out of the existing system we have right now. And that is something that involves change and taking waste out of the system. And you know what? Unfortunately, taking waste out of the system means a different system in many cases.
Well, speaking of that, I just want to hit one quick question before we wrap up from Jerry Boland. So this one's specific to you, Bert. Who is pushing your continuous improvement, and who, in other words, who's your cheerleader, and how is he or she the only reason you want to do what you do? I'm sorry.
Well, I will tell you that all our executive leadership are pushing continuous improvement. Continuous improvement saves money. It makes you more productive. How could you not push that? So I think our executive leadership sees the value in it. I've been doing continuous improvement for a long time, way back in the day and in my industrial life. This is something that I see that helps drive the company value. So this is something that I believe in, and it works, and it's proven out to work. And I think that most of our executive leadership sees that. So I would say everyone that sits in the C-level, everyone on our board of directors, everyone pushes for that continuous improvement as we improve our bottom line and improve for our employees. Continuous improvement not only makes our bottom line better, but it makes life better for our employees. I tell everyone when I go to a site, I work for that truck driver. I try to improve things for him. I'm trying to improve things for the guy that's building the trusses. I'm trying to pull the lumber pullers, processing of the people processing invoices. That's what we try to improve their work life and how they're working in there. So, as far as the cheerleader, I think that's everyone above me and including our board of directors. They want us to be productive. I think this is a very important thing for us. And if you listen to any of, our CEO, when he does his calls, he continuously talks about how we're working to improve and innovate. And I think that just becomes a part of your DNA.
Yeah, great. I'd like to go across the rest of the panelists, maybe ask the question a little bit differently. As we look to change the culture of the industry, how do we drive continuous improvement into each of our organizations? Maybe George, if you want to take it from your perspective and dig into it however you'd like to.
It only happens if you have a leader that understands the importance of it, paints the vision of it, and stays on top of it. If you don't have that, you can get some of it, but it won't survive. So to me, this is a core leadership question. If you see where the future has to be and you understand, you lead people to that, continuous improvement is a major piece of it, because otherwise you're going to sit and you're going to wither. You're going to be, sitting in the dustbin of history. I don't know about these folks. I don't want to be there.
Yeah. Good. Ashley?
Yeah, like Bert, I'm fortunate to be part of a culture that, and a DNA that is pursuing innovation, pursuing continuous improvement. That's been kind of part of one of our core values for many, many years. I think it's continuing to demonstrate results from those improvements and that innovation. I think people respond to results. So I think that is how you pave the way in changing a culture, showing the benefit, not only really from an end user perspective, more satisfied customers and building more efficient homes, and the financial upside. I think it's kind of a win for everybody.
Great. And John, final words.
Yeah, thank you. I think as I think about the question, and I think about continuous improvement, if I reflect back on GE or Rheem or ILG, I always had a product, right? Here's a dishwasher, here's a refrigerator, here's an HVAC system. It's a product, and I can continuously tweak it, build efficiencies, lower the cost, whatever those things are. Now I'm in software, and software is never finished, right? It is a continuous improvement world all day long. And I think where we've failed, quite frankly, because in our industry, technology is a laggard. I mean, we are just above hunters and gatherers as it relates to utilizing technology. And the big builders have utilized it way longer than anybody else. But at the end of the day, it's a laggard. And so when I think about continuous improvement, it's to understand that every single day in our organization, we've got to innovate. We've got to develop new things all along the way. And we all get frustrated with how long development takes, but I don't think we've educated our constituents, our partners, on this continuous improvement as it relates to the technology. It's going to take time. There's going to be things that fail. There's going to be things that break. But long term, if you stay the course, that continuous improvement will change the game. And it'll change the game for everybody involved, because the technology has to be there.
Yeah. Top-down vision, setting expectations, incremental wins, right? I mean, that's what it's going to have to be to find those quick wins and demonstrate the proof points. This has been a fantastic conversation. Really want to say appreciate everyone for taking the time out of their afternoon today. All of our panelists, John, Ashley, Bert, George. It's been fantastic. Look forward to having you all back again sometime soon to continue these conversations through our working groups. If you're attending and you haven't had a chance to scroll through the chat box, I highly suggest you do. There's been some great sidebar conversation taking place, some stories being shared and references being brought up from a number of our participants. I think that'd be great to check that out. We'll also roll those up in summary and share them with the community as appropriate. I referenced our working groups, and this is something that is important to us, and it's a members only activity that we've been conducting over the past few months. Really kicked it off at the end of last year for our annual summit. These are behind the scenes kind of closed curtain sessions that help us shape the agenda for conversations like this one. We've kicked off discussions on labor, on industrialized construction, and again, rethinking the supply chain. There's a variety of other topics we'll get into throughout the course of the year. So if you're interested to get involved, please reach out to Betsy and she'll be able to share more information. Her email address is on the screen there. And then moving forward, I think we have a couple more slides. Want to just share some information about some events we have coming up over the next couple months. So at the end of this month, we have our first Housing Innovation Alliance live stream being produced in-house. This is going to be a reboot of our tour with Hercutech. So 2 years ago, we visited their factory outside of Scottsdale. We're going to be visiting their new factory, learning all about their training academy and some of the new solutions that they're bringing to help make the market Hercu-fit, as they like to describe it. And then we also have our first half-day deep dive, which is going to be on a third Tuesday in April. It's going to be focused on home as a service. When we think of home as a service, we look at it as an ongoing touch points for a better experience, stronger relationships, and value add revenue opportunities for our builder audience. So this is really going to be an opportunity for us to dig into this whole concept around building a customer for life. So look forward to having you participate in that as well. And you can learn more about both of those events on our website at housinginnovationalliance.com.